What do the best heads of department do differently? It's not that they work harder, it's not that they're the best teachers, and it's not that they have the biggest personalities. It's that they stop seeing themselves as someone who runs a subject and start thinking like they're leading an organisation. That shift in mindset completely changes the question you ask, the decisions you make, and ultimately the impact that you have. When I was researching middle leadership for my masters, one thing became really clear. The most effective heads of department weren't just coordinating timetables and checking assessments, they were shaping culture, developing people, creating direction. In other words, they were already thinking strategically. And if you're hoping to move into senior leadership one day, this mindset can make a huge difference. When people hear head of department, they often picture someone organising schemes of work, sorting cover and checking exercise books. That's part of the role, but it's only part of the story. A department has its own team, its own culture, its own priorities, its own strengths, its own challenges and its own identity. And when you stop thinking of your department as a collection of classrooms and start seeing it as a living organisation, your role changes. You stop asking, what needs doing today? And you begin asking, where do I want this department to be in 3 years' time? That shift is where strategic leadership begins. Great heads of department don't just manage activity, they shape direction. As part of my masters, I compared heads of department job descriptions with what middle leaders actually told me they were doing. And the difference was fascinating. On paper, the role looked operational, monitoring, assessment, budgets, policies, quality assurance. But when people described their day-to-day reality, they spoke about something very different. They talked about building teams, improving teaching, developing colleagues, creating consistency, leading change. Those aren't just tasks, they're strategic decisions. And it reminded me that some of the most important leadership in the school never happens in the head teacher's office. It happens inside departments. I think every head of department goes through a phase where they're constantly firefighting. You're solving today's problems, covering lessons, replying to emails, sorting behaviour, chasing data, and before you know it, another week has gone by. The challenge is that if all you ever do is solve today's problems, you never create tomorrow's success. The strongest middle leaders deliberately carve out time to think. What's working? What isn't? Where are we heading? What one improvement would make the biggest difference next term? Strategic thinking isn't something you do when you become a senior leader. It's something you practice long before that. If you only work in your department, you'll always be busy. The best leaders also work on their department. One of the biggest lessons I've learned in leadership is this: departments improve when people improve. Not policies, not spreadsheets, but people. The best heads of departments spend time coaching colleagues, sharing good practice, giving people ownership, helping others grow. Because if every improvement depends on you, your department will only ever be as strong as one person. Real leadership is about making everyone around you better. Here's a simple challenge. Imagine you couldn't teach for a month. Would your department continue to improve, or would everything stop? That's quite an uncomfortable question, but it's an important one. Because strategic leaders build systems, they develop people, they create consistency. They don't become the bottleneck. They create an environment where success continues even when they're not in the room. Senior leadership starts earlier than you think. This is why I believe heads of department have one of the best leadership development opportunities in education. You're already balancing people, performance, curriculum improvement and accountability. The scale may be smaller than whole school leadership, but the thinking is remarkably similar. The colleagues who move successfully into senior leadership aren't waiting until promotion to think strategically, they're already doing it. So here's something I'd encourage you to do this week. Set aside 30 minutes. No emails, no data, no interruptions. And ask yourself these 5 questions. Where do I want my department to be in 3 years' time? What culture am I creating? Who am I developing? What's one thing we should stop doing? What's one thing we should start doing? Those 5 questions will probably have more impact than any other hour clearing your inbox. If you aspire to senior leadership, don't wait until you have a bigger title to think strategically. Start now. Lead your department as though you're preparing it for long-term success, because that's exactly what senior leaders do across an entire school. The title of this video is Why Great Heads of Department Think Like CEOs. Not because schools are businesses, and not because education is about profit, because the very best heads of department think beyond today's tasks. They build culture, develop people, create direction, and make decisions that will still matter years from now. That's what strategic leadership looks like. And in my experience, that's exactly why so many outstanding senior leaders become as outstanding heads of department.